Have you ever seen someone sitting alone trying to smile, even when their heart was breaking? Blair had waited all morning for her first date in years. But when he finally walked in, he took one look at her wheelchair and walked right out. The whole cafe went silent until a little girl pointed and asked, "Daddy, why is that lady sad?" That single question would change 3 lives forever. Before we go on, allow me to wish you peace and good health. Tell me, from which country and at what time are you watching this story? It was the kind of afternoon Asheville was known for: warm light spilling through golden leaves, the scent of cinnamon drifting from open cafe doors, and a slow rhythm that made the small town feel like a heartbeat. Evelyn Hart sat by the window at Maple and Pine Cafe, adjusting the hem of her pale blue dress. 2 years had passed since the accident. 2 long years since the sound of applause in the gymnasium had turned into the sterile hum of a hospital room. This, she told herself, was her first step back into the world. She had practiced her smile in the mirror that morning. Not too bright, not too timid, just enough to say, "I'm fine." She'd even curled her hair, soft chestnut waves that fell neatly around her shoulders. The reflection had almost fooled her. Almost. Beneath the gentle curls, the makeup, the blue dress, she was still the woman learning to live in a body that no longer obeyed her. The cafe was nearly full, young couples sharing pie, retirees discussing church events, and the hiss of milk steaming behind the counter. She had chosen this spot carefully. The corner table by the window, wide enough for her wheelchair without bumping into anyone. From here, she could see the maple trees lining the street and the slow swirl of autumn outside. It was cozy, familiar, and a little bit hopeful, like maybe good things could still happen here. Her date was due at 2 o'clock. She checked her phone again, 1:58. Her hands, resting on the wheels of her chair, trembled slightly. The man's name was Nate Sloan, tall, clean-cut, the kind of smile that made you think he never had a bad day. They had met through an online site, something her best friend had insisted she try. "You can't heal in isolation," her friend had said. Evelyn had rolled her eyes, but part of her knew it was true. A small bell chimed as the door opened. She looked up. There he was. He scanned the cafe, his expression polite, curious. When their eyes met, she lifted a hand, smiling just as she'd practiced. He started walking toward her, and for one small, fleeting second, she believed this might work. But then his gaze dropped to the wheelchair, to the polished metal, and the small, motionless feet resting on the footplates. Something in his face changed. Not disgust, not horror. Disappointment, maybe, like he'd been promised something else. "You didn't mention this in your profile," he said when he reached her table. His voice carried easily over the quiet cafe. Evelyn's practiced smile faltered. "I wanted to tell you in person." "Right." He glanced around, aware that people were listening now. The couple beside them fell silent. Even the barista paused mid-wipe. "Look, I'm sure you're nice, but I don't do charity cases. This isn't what I signed up for." The words landed like a slap. She gripped the armrests, trying to steady her breath. "I wasn't asking for charity," she whispered. "Just coffee." But Nate was already stepping back, one hand raised in a polite half-wave. "Good luck with everything." Then he was gone, the bell above the door jingling lightly as if mocking her. The cafe stayed quiet. People looked away, pretending not to notice. The barista busied herself at the counter. Evelyn stared at the empty chair across from her, the one she'd pulled aside earlier so he could sit comfortably. Such a small, thoughtful gesture. And now, it looked absurd. She had made room for someone who never intended to stay. Her coffee sat untouched. She lifted it, more for something to do than to drink. The cup was warm against her palms. She told herself she wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of all these strangers. She'd survived hospitals, surgeries, endless therapy sessions. She could survive this, too. Outside, a leaf brushed against the window, caught briefly in the wind before it fell away. Inside, she sat still, trying to disappear into the sound of soft jazz. 20 minutes passed before her phone lit up with a notification. An old message, a reminder from her calendar. Physical therapy appointment tomorrow, 9 a.m. A quiet, merciless reminder that life went on whether she wanted it to or not. Evelyn placed her phone face down on the table. The screen reflected a shimmer of light and, faintly, her own face. The woman looking back at her didn't seem broken. just tired. She wondered how long it would take before she felt like a whole person again. Then, through the thick silence, came a voice. Small, curious, impossibly sincere. "Daddy, why is that lady sad?" Evelyn turned toward the voice. Standing a few feet away was a little girl, maybe 5 or 6, her dark curls bouncing around her cheeks. She clutched a stuffed bunny to her chest and stared with wide, serious eyes. Behind her stood a man in his 30s, tall, with tired kindness written all over his face. His suit was neat but not flashy, his posture slightly bent, as if he'd spent years carrying more than briefcases. "Rosie," he said gently, "we don't ask people questions like that." "But she looks sad," the child said, her small voice cutting through the air like light through dust. The man's expression softened. He took a few steps closer, his hand resting on the little girl's shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said to Evelyn. "My daughter doesn't quite understand personal boundaries yet." Evelyn managed a polite smile, though her throat felt tight. "It's all right." Rosie tilted her head, studying her with the kind of honesty adults forget how to have. "Are you sad because that man left?" she asked. "I saw him leave. That wasn't very nice." Evelyn tried to answer, but the kindness in the question undid her. "I'll be okay, sweetheart," she said softly. "You don't look okay," Rosie insisted, frowning a little. "You look like you're trying not to cry." "Rosie," the man said again, a quiet warning this time. The little girl turned to her father. "Can we help her? You always say we should help people who are sad." The man hesitated, then met Evelyn's eyes. There was something in his gaze that didn't feel like pity, it felt like recognition. "Would you mind," he asked carefully, "if we joined you? Only if you want company. We can absolutely leave you alone." Evelyn hesitated. Every instinct told her to refuse, to retreat, to preserve what was left of her pride. But the way he asked, like her answer, mattered, like she had a choice, made her pause. She nodded once. "Sure," she said quietly. "Why not?" He smiled, pulling out the chair across from her, the one Nate had never sat in. "Thank you," he said. "I'm Grant, and this is Rosie." Rosie climbed into the seat beside him and immediately placed her stuffed bunny on the table, facing Evelyn as if the toy were part of the conversation. "I like your dress," she said solemnly. "It's the color of the sky." Evelyn looked down at the pale blue fabric, surprised by the lump in her throat. "Thank you," she replied. "I like your dress, too." "Mine has daisies," Rosie said proudly. "Daddy says flowers make everything better, but I don't think that's true. When I'm really sad, flowers don't help. Bunny helps." Grant chuckled softly. "Rosie has strong opinions about emotional support animals." Evelyn smiled, a real smile this time. "Bunny seems very reliable." The barista approached their table with a tentative grin. "Would you like something else, hon?" Grant ordered hot chocolate for Rosie and another coffee for Evelyn before she could protest. When the drinks arrived, he waved away her attempt to pay. "Consider it our apology for interrupting your quiet afternoon," he said. "Don't worry," Evelyn replied, her voice lighter than she expected. "It wasn't all that quiet." They talked not about the date or the humiliation that still lingered like smoke, but about small things. The weather, Rosie's favorite cartoons, the smell of cinnamon rolls baking behind the counter. Bit by bit, the weight on Evelyn's chest loosened. She found herself laughing when Rosie smeared whipped cream on her nose and declared, "Now I'm a snow bunny." Grant smiled at his daughter, then looked back at Evelyn. "Kids have this way of reminding us that life's still good," he said. Evelyn studied him for a moment. There was warmth in his eyes, but also a shadow, something unspoken, like a grief carried quietly. She recognized it because she lived with it too. Outside, the sun slipped lower, turning the cafe windows to gold. Inside, 3 people, a woman in a wheelchair, a father, and his curious little girl shared a small table that no longer felt empty. When they stood to leave, Grant hesitated. "Would you mind," he asked, "if I saw you again? Maybe at the opening of the new Cascade Rehabilitation Center next month. We're finishing construction soon. You might find it interesting." Evelyn blinked. "You're involved with Cascade?" "I help fund it," he said simply. "It's important work." For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like a stranger in her own story. "I'll think about it," she said. Grant nodded, understanding. That's all anyone can do. As they walked out, Rosie waved her little hand. Bye, blue dress lady. Don't be sad anymore. Evelyn lifted her hand in return, smiling through the sting in her eyes. I'll try not to, she said. When the door closed behind them, the cafe seemed warmer somehow, the air softer. She looked at the empty cups on the table, one coffee, one cocoa, and for the first time in months, she didn't feel alone. Outside, the maple leaves danced in the fading light, and for a fleeting moment, Evelyn thought maybe, just maybe, this was how hope began again. The afternoon had stretched into a soft, golden haze when Evelyn finally rolled away from the cafe window. The sound of the bell over the door still echoed faintly, but in her mind it was replaced by a child's laughter, the same laugh that had startled her out of humiliation only moments earlier. She'd promised herself to leave, but something about the way that little girl had looked at her so open, so utterly without judgment, made her stay. Grant and Rosie had chosen the seats across from her as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Rosie swung her legs under the chair, humming to her stuffed bunny. Grant folded his coat over the backrest, the gesture deliberate and careful, like a man trying not to spill a fragile secret. Thank you for letting us join you, he said. His voice had a calm steadiness that seemed to fill the air between them. It's not every day my daughter insists on meeting a stranger. Evelyn smiled faintly. She seems to know what she wants. Embersent. That she does, Grant replied, glancing at the girl with an affection that softened the angles of his face. Rosie looked up from her cocoa. Daddy says helping people makes your heart bigger. Is your heart bigger now? Grant chuckled. It's getting there. Evelyn's laughter came quietly, almost a sigh. He's right, you know, she said to the child. Helping does make hearts grow, sometimes even the broken ones. Rosie nodded with the solemnity of someone accepting an important truth. Then you must have a very big heart, she said matter-of-factly. For a moment, Evelyn had no answer. The kindness in those small brown eyes felt like sunlight through a crack she'd tried to seal. She took a slow breath and let the warmth of it in. Grant caught her gaze. If you don't mind my asking, he said carefully, what line of work are you in? She hesitated. I used to be a gymnast, she said at last. Now I'm figuring things out. He nodded without pity, just quiet understanding. That's still work worth doing. Their conversation drifted from there, light and meandering. They spoke of Asheville's unpredictable weather, of the maple trees that painted the town red each fall. Grant told her about a new project he was helping fund, a rehabilitation center designed to make therapy less clinical, more human. The Cascade Center? She asked, surprised. I did my rehab at the old location downtown. Then you already know how much it matters, he said. She looked down at her hands, the faint scars near her wrists. It gave me back my independence, she murmured. Though some days, it feels like it took the rest of me. Grant said nothing, but the silence between them wasn't empty. It was patient, like a place where truth could breathe. Rosie, unaware of the gravity in the air, began drawing with a crayon. The waitress had given her a sky full of blue lines and a small figure with a pair of uneven wings. Look, she said proudly. It's you, M. Evelyn blinked. Me? In your blue dress, you can fly. Grant smiled, shaking his head. You see? She's a believer. Evelyn studied the crooked wings, the earnest colors pressed into the napkin. I used to think flying meant running faster, jumping higher, she said softly. Now I think it just means trying again. Grant's expression shifted something like admiration, quiet and unspoken. Outside, the first drops of evening rain began tapping against the window, small and rhythmic, like applause from another world. He gestured toward the drizzle. Seems Asheville's giving us its usual send-off, he said. Evelyn laughed. Then I guess it's time to go before the downpour. They stood, or rather, she wheeled back, and he gathered Rosie's things. When he turned to her again, there was that same gentleness she had noticed before, steady and unhurried. Would you mind, he asked, if we saw you again? Maybe at the Cascade Center's opening next month. It'd be nice to talk without cocoa on the table. Evelyn hesitated, a dozen excuses fluttering in her mind, but none found voice. She nodded instead. Maybe, she said. I'll think about it. Grant smiled. That's all anyone can do. As they left, Rosie waved her small hand. Bye, blue dress lady. Don't be sad anymore. The door closed behind them, and Evelyn felt the hush settle again, but it was a different silence now, softer, threaded with the faintest promise of something new. Rain followed Evelyn home that evening. Not the harsh kind that beats against windows, but a soft, steady drizzle that seemed to echo the rhythm of her thoughts. Asheville always looked beautiful under rain. Headlights reflecting on wet pavement. Cafe lights glowing gold through fog. Strangers huddled beneath shared umbrellas. She moved through it quietly, her wheelchair humming over the sidewalk as she turned toward her apartment near Chestnut Street. Inside, everything smelled faintly of lavender and old books. She hung her coat by the door, placed the half-finished coffee on the counter, and sat for a long while in silence. The blue dress felt heavier now, its fabric clinging to her knees. She reached for the napkin Rosie had drawn on the one with crooked wings and the small, smiling figure in a blue dress. A faint smile tugged at her lips. Fly, the little girl had said. For years, that word had been her entire identity, flight, grace, balance. Now, it felt like a memory from another life. But tonight, it meant something else. Maybe not flying through air, but rising from pain. She turned on the lamp beside the couch. Its light cast soft circles across the living room, the framed photo of her old gymnastics team, the medal she still hadn't put away, the empty space on the shelf where her old life used to sit. And for the first time in a long while, Evelyn whispered to the quiet, "Maybe I can still begin again." The following morning brought sunlight sharp and new. She rolled into the small community gym attached to her building, the scent of pine cleaner and coffee greeting her like an old friend. The mirrors reflected a handful of familiar faces from therapy sessions, and among them, a poster taped crookedly to the bulletin board. Grand opening, Cascade Rehabilitation Center rebuilding strength, restoring hope. Her heart thudded. Grant's name was printed at the bottom as a sponsor. She stared at it for a long time. Her first instinct was to turn away, to avoid any place that might remind her of everything she'd lost. But Rosie's voice echoed in her head. "You can fly." That afternoon, she found herself at her favorite diner instead of home Maple and Pine again, because some places anchor you when you're lost. She ordered her usual coffee and a slice of pecan pie she didn't intend to finish. Outside, the rain had cleared, leaving the street washed clean and glistening. She almost didn't notice the figure approaching until she heard the familiar voice. "I had a feeling I'd find you here," Grant said, appearing beside her table with a warm, uncertain smile. Evelyn blinked in surprise. "You were looking for me?" He nodded. "Rosie's been asking about the blue dress lady, nonstop. I thought I'd better come check before she organized a search party." Evelyn couldn't help but laugh. "She sounds determined. Determined is her specialty." He sat down after a pause, waiting for her nod of permission before pulling out the chair. That small courtesy made something ease inside her chest. "I saw the poster," she said. "Cascade's opening soon." Grant smiled. "Next month. You should come. I think you'd like what we're trying to do there." "What's that?" she asked. "Make people believe healing doesn't have to hurt." His voice softened. "My wife used to say that. She was a physical therapist. The center was her dream." Evelyn looked at him then. Really looked, and the shadow she'd sensed before took shape. There was grief in his voice, but also purpose, as if he'd built something out of the pieces of what he'd lost. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "Most people don't," he replied. But she believed in second chances. So do I. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, the wind carried a swirl of leaves across the sidewalk, scattering sunlight in their wake. Evelyn's coffee had gone cold, but she didn't care. Something in her chest shifted, not quite peace, but the possibility of it. "Grant," she said finally, "maybe I will come to that opening after all." He smiled, and it wasn't the polite kind people wear for strangers. It was the quiet, grateful kind that says, "I understand." "I'd like that," he said. And so would Rosie. Yeah. They sat there for a while, not as strangers or saviors or broken pieces trying to fit, but as two people learning to breathe in the same rhythm again. When Grant finally stood to leave, Evelyn noticed he'd left his umbrella leaning against the wall. She picked it up, turning it over in her hands. A small silver tag was engraved on the handle. "Maggie Ellison Keep Moving Forward." She smiled to herself. Outside, the rain began again, gentle, forgiving, full of promise. 3 weeks later, Asheville woke beneath a thin layer of frost. The streets shimmered like glass, and the air carried the sharp, clean scent of winter pine. Evelyn guided her wheelchair up the smooth ramp toward the new Cascade Rehabilitation Center, her breath forming small clouds that drifted away like thoughts she wasn't ready to hold. The building rose from the hillside, like something made of air and sunlight, all glass, pale wood, and open space. She hesitated at the entrance, fingers cold around the wheels. Her invitation had sat on the kitchen table for days before she decided to come. Part of her still wondered if it was a mistake. Inside, warmth and the faint smell of new paint greeted her. People in crisp uniforms moved easily among the guests. Therapists, doctors, local donors. The atmosphere buzzed with polite conversation and the clinking of coffee cups. But beneath the formal smiles, Evelyn sensed something honest, an undercurrent of gratitude, as if everyone here understood that rebuilding lives was holy work. "Evie!" The voice came from across the room. Rosie darted through the crowd, her little shoes tapping against the polished floor, her curls bouncing as she ran. She wore a navy dress with white ribbons and waved her arms as if she might take flight. "You came." Evelyn laughed, surprised by the sudden hug around her arm. "I told your dad I'd try." "You did more than try." Rosie grinned up at her. "Daddy said you helped him fix the ramp design, so technically, you're part of this place." Evelyn blinked. "He did?" A familiar voice answered from behind her. "You did." Grant stood near the entrance, hands in his pockets, looking both exhausted and proud. The light from the tall windows reflected off his dark coat, and for a heartbeat she thought he looked almost like the sunlight itself, something steady after a long storm. "I took your advice," he continued. "We redesigned the doorways and rails based on your notes. Turns out, lived experience beats a dozen architects." She smiled shyly. "I didn't think you'd actually read that email." "I read everything you write." The words hung between them for a moment, soft and sincere. Then Rosie broke the silence, tugging her father's sleeve. "Daddy, show her the garden. It's got real flowers, not the fake kind." Grant chuckled. "All right, tour guide. Lead the way." They followed Rosie outside, through a sliding door that opened into a courtyard bright with winter sunlight. Raised garden beds lined the path, their soil dark and ready for spring planting. Wheelchair-height benches and smooth walkways wound between them. It wasn't lush yet. The flowers were only dreams beneath the soil, but the place already felt alive. Evelyn reached out and touched the wooden edge of one bed. "You thought of everything," she said. Grant looked around, his expression softening. "I tried to build a place that says you still belong here." She nodded. "It does." They paused beside a small fountain. Water trickled over the stones, its sound bright and clean. For a moment, neither spoke. The cold breeze lifted strands of her hair, and he gently brushed one away before he seemed to realize what he'd done. "I'm sorry," he murmured, stepping back slightly. "Don't be," she said. Her voice was quiet, but sure. Inside, a woman called for everyone to gather for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Rosie darted ahead again, excitement lighting her face. Evelyn and Grant followed, the rhythm of their wheels and footsteps falling naturally into sync. The crowd inside the main hall gathered beneath a tall skylight, where sunlight poured through the rain-washed glass in shimmering ribbons. A local reporter announced the opening ceremony, her voice echoing softly against the wood-paneled walls. Evelyn found a quiet corner near the back, watching as Grant stepped up to the podium with Rosie perched on a chair beside him. He didn't speak like a man rehearsing a speech. He spoke like someone remembering. "Cascade isn't just a building," he said. "It's a promise that healing is still possible, even when life doesn't look the way it used to. My wife, Maggie, believed recovery begins when someone looks at you and sees potential, not pity. That's what this place is meant to do." He paused, his eyes searching the crowd until they met Evelyn's. "And for everyone here who's fought their way back, who still wakes up every day and tries again, this is for you." The applause rose softly at first, then filled the room like rain against the glass. Evelyn felt something shift inside her, not pride, not sadness, but recognition. Every word he spoke carried a quiet truth she hadn't let herself believe until now. She was more than what she'd lost. After the ribbon was cut and the cameras drifted away, the building transformed into a living space, again laughter in the halls, the gentle hum of wheelchairs, children darting between legs and tables with cupcakes in hand. Rosie ran toward Evelyn holding 2 paper cups of lemonade. Daddy said you like coffee, but this is better, she said, breathless. Evelyn accepted the cup, smiling. It's perfect. Grant joined them a moment later. Sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. I think she's right, he said. Coffee's too serious for a celebration. Then here's to lemonade and new beginnings, Evelyn replied, raising her cup. They clinked their drinks together lightly. A moment later, a soft drizzle began outside, drops tapping gently against the wide glass windows. Rosie pressed her face to the glass, watching the trails of water run down. It's raining again, she said. But Daddy says rain helps things grow. Evelyn glanced at Grant, their reflections mingling faintly in the glass, two faces blurred by light and water. He's right, she said softly. Sometimes rain's the only reason we bloom. Grant smiled, his voice low. You sound like Maggie. She must have been a good woman. She was, he said simply. And she'd have liked you. They stood there in silence for a long time, listening to the rain and the quiet murmur of the crowd behind them. Rosie turned back, tugging at her father's hand. Daddy, can we take her to the diner later? The one with the cinnamon rolls? Evelyn laughed. You two really like that place, huh? Grant met her eyes, something warm and unspoken passing between them. It's where good things happen, he said. Would you join us? For a moment she hesitated, then nodded. I'd like that. Rosie cheered and ran ahead, Bunny in one hand, the other waving in excitement. Grant offered his arm as she turned her chair toward the door. Outside, the air was cool and sweet, with the scent of wet maple leaves. Sunlight filtered through the fading rain, scattering over the pavement in rippling gold. Evelyn felt the warmth against her skin and realized she wasn't just surviving anymore, she was beginning to live. As they left Cascade behind, the reflection of the building shimmered in the puddles like a second sky. She looked up at the faint rainbow stretching across the clouds and whispered to herself, maybe this is what flying feels like now. The Maple and Pine Diner glowed like a beacon that evening, all amber lights and the smell of cinnamon drifting out to the street. The neon sign flickered softly in the mist. Open 24 hours. Inside, the booths gleamed red and gold, and an old jukebox hummed a tune that might have been from 1965. Evelyn waited by the window, her reflection blurred against the glass. It was the same spot where everything had begun, the awkward date, the humiliation, the tears she'd swallowed behind a cup of coffee. Now, the room felt different, warmer, like she'd stepped back into a memory that no longer hurt. The bell above the door chimed. Grant entered first, holding it open with an easy grace. Rosie followed, her curls slightly damp from the evening drizzle, clutching the ever-faithful stuffed bunny. You got the good table, Rosie declared, climbing into the seat across from Evelyn. Daddy says the corner ones make you invisible. Evelyn smiled. Then it's a good thing we're in the middle tonight. Grant slid into the booth beside his daughter, shrugging off his coat. Middle's the best place to start over, don't you think? The waitress appeared with a familiar grin. Well, look who's back. The lemonade trio, she teased, setting down menus. Same order as before. Or you feeling adventurous tonight? Cinnamon rolls, Rosie said immediately. 3, please. 1 each, so nobody argues. Evelyn laughed. You're a little negotiator, aren't you? Grandma says I'd make a good lawyer. Daddy says I'd make a good mayor. Both sound dangerous, Grant said, half under his breath. The conversation drifted easily after that stories about Rosie's school project, Grant's upcoming work trip, and Evelyn's art therapy sessions. She mentioned, almost shyly, that she'd started sketching again. That's wonderful, Grant said. You always seemed like someone who could turn feelings into something beautiful. Evelyn blushed slightly. Mostly it's just doodles. Birds, clouds, maybe too many wings lately. Too many wings sounds like a good problem to have. She looked at him then, and the way he said it simple, sincere, made her heart ache a little. Their food arrived, warm and fragrant. Rosie tore into her cinnamon roll like it was treasure, her fingers sticky with icing. Grant reached across for napkins, and Evelyn noticed the faint tremor in his hand, like a memory passing through muscle. You okay? She asked softly. He smiled, almost sheepishly. Yeah. Just haven't been here since Maggie. Evelyn nodded, understanding without needing more words. Places keep ghosts, she said gently. But sometimes they make room for new stories too. He met her chaser. You really believe that? I have to. The jukebox shifted songs, playing an old Frank Sinatra track that filled the air with nostalgia. Rosie began to hum along between bites, her voice small but sure. Grant leaned back, watching her with quiet affection. "She gets that from her mom," he murmured. Evelyn's voice softened.
"And what about you? What do you get from her?"
He hesitated. "Perspective, I guess. She taught me that love isn't about fixing people. It's about staying when they can't fix themselves." The words settled deep in Evelyn's chest, hitting something fragile. She stared at her reflection in the window again, this time seeing not a woman in a wheelchair, but a woman still learning to stay. The night deepened outside the diner, the world bathed in amber light and the soft patter of rain on the windows. Inside, the hum of quiet conversations filled the spaces between the clinking of plates and the low croon of Sinatra's voice. Evelyn watched the way Rosie leaned into her father, resting her head on his arm, content and safe. There was something healing about that simple image, a small piece of life restored. Grant stirred his coffee, though it had already gone cold. "Maggie used to bring me here after her appointments," he said softly. She joked that cinnamon rolls were better medicine than anything the doctors prescribed. Evelyn smiled faintly. "She sounds like she was right. She usually was." His eyes drifted toward the rain-slicked window. "When she got sick, I tried to fix everything, rearranged our house, read every medical journal I could find, built a plan for every possible outcome. But you can't plan your way out of loss." Evelyn listened quietly. "You built something anyway," she said. "The center, it's more than a building. It's her memory, still working." He nodded. "Maybe, but I've been wondering lately if I built it to honor her or to avoid feeling the emptiness she left behind." Evelyn's chest tightened. She knew that emptiness, the silence that stretches between who you were and who you are now. "Maybe it doesn't have to be one or the other," she said. "Maybe rebuilding something or someone is its own kind of healing." He looked at her, the flicker of the diner light catching in his eyes. "Is that what you're doing?" "Trying to." She gave a small, self-conscious laugh. "Some days I think I'm making progress. Other days, I'm just good at pretending." "Pretending counts," he said softly. "It means you're still trying to believe." The words landed like a hand on her shoulder, gentle, grounding. For a long moment, neither spoke. Rosie had fallen asleep against the booth, her stuffed bunny still clutched in one sticky hand. Grant reached across the table and brushed a bit of powdered sugar from Evelyn's sleeve. The gesture was small, almost accidental, but it sent a ripple through her chest that startled her. She wanted to pull back to protect the fragile calm between them, but she didn't. Instead, she said quietly, "You don't have to feel sorry for me, Grant." His brows furrowed. "Who said I do?" "I've seen that look before," she said, voice steady but soft. "People trying to be kind because they think kindness makes them good. I don't need rescuing." He leaned forward, the faintest trace of frustration in his voice, not anger, but sincerity, edged with hurt. "Evelyn, if you think this is pity, you don't know me at all." Her breath caught. The air between them felt charged, fragile. "I don't see a woman in a wheelchair," he continued quietly. "I see someone brave enough to start again. And if I reach out, it's not to save you. It's because I want to be near you." Evelyn's fingers tightened on her cup. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let the warmth in. But old instincts, the ones born from humiliation, from being left behind, whispered that it couldn't be that simple. She forced a small smile, pushing her cup away. "It's getting late. You should get Rosie home." Grant hesitated, as if he wanted to say more, then nodded. "You're probably right." He lifted Rosie gently into his arms, her curls brushing his shoulder. When he turned to leave, Evelyn caught his reflection in the window, a man walking into the rain, carrying his daughter and something unspoken between them. Outside, the streetlights blurred through the drizzle. Evelyn watched until they disappeared into the night, her heart tangled between gratitude and fear. She turned back to the empty booth, the half-eaten cinnamon roll, the coffee gone cold, somewhere beneath the noise of the rain. She whispered to herself, half prayer, half confession, "Don't let this be another story that ends too soon." The jukebox clicked softly to the next song, and the melody rose wistful, steady, like a heartbeat refusing to fade. The days that followed felt like walking through fog, not painful, just uncertain. Evelyn woke each morning to the sound of the city stirring outside her window, Buses sighing at stops, a dog barking somewhere down the block, the faint clatter of a neighbor watering plants on the balcony. Ordinary sounds, grounding sounds, but beneath them lingered a restlessness she couldn't name. She told herself it was just exhaustion. That dinner at the diner, that look in Grant's eyes, it had stirred things she'd carefully packed away. Things she wasn't sure she was ready to feel again. Her sketchbook sat open on the coffee table, the latest drawing unfinished. It showed a woman sitting at a window, a cup of coffee before her, the world outside blurred by rain. Evelyn had stopped midline, unable to decide whether the woman should be alone or waiting for someone. A knock interrupted her thoughts. When she opened the door, a small figure stood in the hallway. Rosie, bundled in a puffy pink coat, holding a white envelope. Behind her, Grant offered a sheepish smile. "I told her it might not be a good time," he said. "It's okay," Evelyn replied, surprised by how true it felt. "Come in." Rosie bounced forward, handing her the envelope. "It's an invitation," she said proudly, "for the art fair at my school. Daddy says you make beautiful drawings, so I wanted you to come see mine." Evelyn crouched slightly to meet the girl's eyes. "You drew something for me?" Rosie nodded so hard her curls shook. "You'll see, but you have to come." Evelyn smiled, her heart softening. "Then I'll be there." Grant lingered near the door, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets. "She's been talking about it for a week. I think she likes having you as part of her world." "Careful," Evelyn teased. "That's how kids trap you forever." Grant chuckled. "I think I've already been trapped." Their eyes met a quiet pause that stretched, tender and dangerous. Evelyn looked away first. "Coffee?" she offered. He nodded. "Only if you let me make it." In her small kitchen, he moved with an ease that surprised her, humming softly as he measured grounds. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the apartment, mingling with the faint scent of her lavender candle. It felt domestic, ordinary, beautiful. When they sat across from each other at the table, Evelyn broke the silence first. "About that night at the diner, I might have overreacted." Grant shook his head. "No, you were honest. I just wasn't clear enough." She hesitated. "It's hard for me to tell the difference sometimes between someone being kind and someone trying to fix me." "I get that," he said. "After Maggie passed, people kept treating me like glass, smiling too hard, talking too softly. They meant well, but it made me feel less human." She looked at him, really looked the faint lines near his eyes, the weariness that never quite left his voice. "You know," she said gently, "you're allowed to miss her and still move forward." He exhaled slowly. "I'm trying, but sometimes I feel guilty for even wanting that." Evelyn nodded. "Maybe we're both still learning how to let go without forgetting." The quiet that followed wasn't awkward. It was soft, almost sacred. Outside, the wind carried the scent of rain again. Rosie had fallen asleep on the couch, her tiny hand clutching Evelyn's sketchbook. Grant smiled at the sight. "She's claimed you, you know." Evelyn's heart warmed. "I'm honored." For a long time, they just sat there, two people surrounded by stillness and the ghost of things lost. The distance between them felt smaller now, filled not with fear but with possibility. Then Grant's phone buzzed sharp, insistent, breaking the calm. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "Work?" Evelyn asked softly. He nodded. "One of the investors they're pushing for a change in the center structure. Something about turning it into a private facility." Her stomach tightened. "But that would make it unaffordable for most patients." "Exactly," he said grimly. "Maggie's entire mission was access for everyone. I won't let them take that away." He stood, slipping on his coat. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bring this energy in here." Evelyn shook her head. "Don't apologize. You're fighting for something good." He smiled, small but grateful. "I'll call you tomorrow?" She nodded. "Be careful." When the door closed behind him, the apartment felt too quiet again. Evelyn glanced at the sleeping child. The sketchbook clutched in her small hand, the unfinished drawing on the page. She took a pencil, hesitated, then added a faint silhouette beside the woman at the window. Not perfect, not whole, but there. Maybe letting go wasn't about erasing what came before. Maybe it was about making room for what could still come next. Outside, Thunder rumbled softly, a storm gathering somewhere far away. The morning of the school art fair arrived, wrapped in sunlight and the crisp scent of autumn leaves. Evelyn dressed carefully, a cream sweater, soft scarf, and the sketchbook Rosie loved tucked in her bag. She hadn't seen Grant in nearly a week. Their last conversation had ended with a promise to call, but the phone had stayed silent. She told herself he was just busy with the center's board meeting, yet a quiet ache lingered beneath the surface. The school gym buzzed with laughter and chatter. Tables were lined with colorful drawings, suns with smiling faces, rainbows bending across stick-figure towns, families holding hands. Rosie spotted her the moment she entered. "Evelyn!" she cried, waving so wildly her paper bunny ears slipped off. Evelyn laughed, maneuvering through the crowd toward her. "There's my favorite artist. Come see mine." Rosie grabbed her hand and led her to a table covered in glitter and construction paper. In the center was a drawing of a woman in a blue dress sitting in a wheelchair, with a little girl beside her holding a bunny. Above them, in careful block letters, Rosie had written, "Not all wings are feathers." Evelyn's breath caught. "Rosie, this is beautiful. I drew it because you told me flying can mean lots of things," Rosie said proudly. "Daddy said you helped him fly again, too." Before Evelyn could respond, she heard a voice behind her, low, familiar, tense. "Rosie, sweetheart, I told you to wait until I got here." Grant stood a few feet away, dressed sharply but looking tired, distracted. There was a stiffness in his smile that hadn't been there before. "Sorry," Rosie said sheepishly. "I just wanted to show her." Evelyn tried to hide her nerves. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hey." His tone was polite but distant, his eyes flickering toward the other parents. "Glad you could make it." The warmth that usually filled his voice was missing. Something was off. As the fair continued, Grant drifted between conversations with other parents and a man Evelyn didn't recognize, tall, in a gray suit, carrying a tablet. She caught bits of their exchange. Private funding, higher margins, exclusivity. Her stomach tightened. This must have been the investor he'd mentioned. When the man left, Evelyn wheeled closer. "That didn't sound good," she said softly. Grant sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "They want to change the center's mission. Less community access, more focus on high-end clients. But that's everything Maggie stood for," she said. "I know." He looked weary. "But if I push back too hard, they could pull funding altogether. And without it, the staff loses their jobs. So you'll just let them change it?" "It's not that simple." The frustration in his tone made her flinch. She knew it wasn't about her, but the distance between them suddenly felt like a canyon. Evelyn hesitated. "You're fighting the wrong battle, Grant. Maggie built that place for people like—" She stopped herself. "People like you?" he finished, his voice sharper than he intended. Silence. "That's not what I meant," he added quickly. "No, it's fine," she said, her voice brittle. "I get it. That's what everyone sees first anyway." "Evelyn, that's not—" But she was already turning her chair away. "You should be with your daughter. She's the one who believes you can still fly." The gym noise faded behind her as she wheeled outside into the cool air. Leaves crunched beneath her tires. Her eyes stung, but she refused to let tears fall. Not here, not now. She stopped under a maple tree at the edge of the parking lot and looked back through the window. Inside, Rosie was laughing, showing her drawing to another parent. Grant crouched beside her, trying to smile. The image hurt in a way she couldn't quite explain, too close to something she wanted but didn't dare hope for. Her phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Grant. "Grant, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. Please don't shut me out." She stared at the words, her thumb hovering over the screen. Then she closed the phone without replying. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, "You're not running away. You're protecting what's left." But even as she told herself that, Evelyn knew it wasn't true. She wasn't protecting herself. She was just afraid to believe that someone could see her as more than a symbol, more than a story of survival. The wind picked up, scattering golden leaves across the pavement. One landed on her lap, its color bright against the pale fabric of her sweater. She brushed it away, whispering to no one. "You can't keep flying if you're too afraid to land." The storm came without warning, the kind that turns the Blue Ridge horizon into a curtain of gray and fills the air with the smell of wet pine and lightning. Grant sat in his office at Cascade Rehabilitation Center, papers spread across his desk. the echo of his argument with Evelyn still heavy in his mind. He'd replayed that moment 100 times. The way her expression had closed, how the warmth in her eyes had vanished, replaced by something colder than anger, disappointment. He hadn't meant to say, "people like you." But in a way, maybe he had. The words had come from fear of losing the center, fear of failing Maggie's legacy, fear of wanting something new when the past wasn't done with him yet. He rubbed his temples, glancing at the framed photograph on his desk. Maggie, standing beside a patient on the old therapy mats, her smile wide and steady. She'd always believed people could change. She'd believed in him once, too. The door opened softly. It was the center's director, a middle-aged woman named Dr. Collins. "You've been here since 6, she said gently. "You should go home." "Can't," he replied. "The investors want an answer by morning." She hesitated. "Whatever happens, don't let them turn this place into something Maggie wouldn't recognize." Grant looked up. "That's the problem. I already did." Before she could answer, his phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. "Rosie, school nurse here. Your daughter's fine, but she fell during recess. Might need a parent to pick her up." Grant was on his feet before the message finished loading. Rain drummed against the windshield as he drove through the winding streets toward the elementary school. His mind was a blur, half panic, half guilt. When he arrived, Rosie was sitting in the nurse's office, a Band-Aid on her knee and a juice box in her hand. "Hey, champ," he said, crouching beside her. "You okay?" She nodded solemnly. "It's just a scrape. But Mrs. Taylor said you looked sad on the phone." He smiled weakly. "Maybe I was. You scared me a little." Rosie leaned closer. "You should tell Miss Evelyn I'm okay too. I know she was sad last time. Maybe it would make both of you better." He blinked, taken aback. "You think so?" She nodded with the simple certainty of a child who still believed kindness fixed everything. "You always tell me bridges are better than walls." Her words struck deep. Maggie had once said something almost identical years ago after their first big argument.
You don't have to be right to build a bridge, Grant.
You just have to care more about crossing it than winning it. By the time he got Rosie home, the rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and cold. He tucked her into bed, kissed her forehead, and sat by her for a long moment as she drifted to sleep. Then he stood, grabbed his coat, and left again, this time with purpose. Evelyn's apartment building was quiet when he arrived. The porch light glowed faintly through the mist, and he could see her silhouette through the window, sketching at her desk. He hesitated before knocking, unsure if she'd even open the door. When she did, her surprise was obvious. "Grant, I know it's late," he said, "but I didn't want another night to pass without saying this." Evelyn crossed her arms. "You don't owe me an apology." "Yes, I do," he said. "And more than that, I owe you the truth." She hesitated, eyes wary but curious. "Go on." He took a breath. "When I said people like you, I didn't mean to put you in a box. I meant," he struggled for words, "that you remind me of the kind of strength Maggie used to talk about. The kind that doesn't shout or fight to be seen. It just endures. And I think it scared me, because you made me want to hope again." Evelyn's expression softened, but her voice remained cautious. "Hope isn't a bad thing, Grant." "No," he said. "But when you've lost it before, it feels dangerous to pick it up again." For a moment, neither spoke. Rain dripped from the awning above, steady and rhythmic. Then Evelyn gestured to the sketchbook on her table. "I was just drawing," she said quietly. "Do you want to see?" He nodded. On the page was a bridge, delicate arches stretching across a river, one side complete, the other still under construction. Beneath it, a small figure sat in a wheelchair, sketching the rest of the bridge from the shore. He smiled faintly. "You always know how to say things without words." "Maybe that's why I draw," she said. He looked at her, eyes steady. "Then draw us a bridge, Evelyn, because I'm tired of standing on opposite sides." She didn't answer right away, but her hand trembled slightly as she picked up the pencil and began tracing another line, one that reached all the way across. Morning light filtered through the blinds, spilling across Evelyn's sketchbook. She had fallen asleep at her desk, the unfinished bridge still open on the page. For the first time in months, her sleep had been peaceful. No restless dreams of falling, no echoes of the accident. Just rain, sunlight, and Grant's quiet voice saying, "Draw us a bridge." A soft knock at the door pulled her awake. When she opened it, a courier stood in the hallway holding a brown envelope stamped Cascade Rehabilitation Center, urgent. She signed for it, heart tightening as she tore the seal. Inside was a formal notice, a request for review by the Board of Investors. They intended to restructure operations to maximize return, which in plain language meant turning Maggie's open access center into a private luxury clinic. Evelyn closed her eyes. She could almost hear Maggie's laughter, that steady voice that had carried her through recovery years ago. Healing belongs to everyone. She picked up her phone and texted Grant. Evelyn, I got a notice from Cascade. If you need help with the board meeting, I'll be there. No reply came for hours. She assumed he was too busy, but something in her gut said otherwise, so she went. When she arrived at Cascade that afternoon, tension hung thick in the lobby. A handful of employees stood near the reception desk, whispering nervously. Through the glass walls of the conference room, she could see Grant seated across from two sharply dressed men, the investors she'd overheard at the school art fair. "You're not thinking clearly," one of them said. "Accessibility doesn't sell. Private care is the future." Grant's jaw tightened. "This was never about profit. My wife built this for people who couldn't afford private care. And look where that's gotten you," the other replied coolly, sliding a document across the table. "Sign, or we start pulling funding today." Evelyn didn't think. She pushed the door open, every head turning toward her. "Then pull it," she said. "Because if you turn this place into a playground for the rich, you'll lose more than funding. You'll lose your soul." One of the investors scoffed. "And you are?" "Someone who rebuilt her life because of this place," she said, her voice steady. "Someone who knows what it means to walk or roll through these halls and believe in second chances. You can't measure that in profit margins." Grant stood slowly. "She's right." The investors exchanged glances. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Hayes." "Maybe," he said, "but at least it's one I can live with." He slid the unsigned papers back across the table. "We'll find another way." And the men gathered their things, muttering about lost investments, and left. The door closed behind them with a sharp click that sounded, to Evelyn, like freedom. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then Grant exhaled a long, shuddering breath that seemed to release weeks of pressure. "You shouldn't have come," he said softly. "I couldn't stay away." He looked up, meeting her gaze. "You just saved everything Maggie worked for." Evelyn shook her head. "You saved it. I just reminded you why it mattered." Grant's expression softened, the weight in his shoulders lifting. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't," she said. "Just keep building bridges." They stepped out into the main hall, sunlight breaking through the storm clouds outside. Staff members watched as the tension dissolved, relief spreading like warmth through the room. Rosie ran in a few minutes later, brought by her grandmother, clutching a hand-drawn sign that said, "Cascade belongs to everyone." Grant laughed, scooping her up. "Guess we've got our new marketing director." Evelyn smiled, her heart swelling. "You raised a good one." He looked at her then, his voice quiet. "We're still learning, all of us." Outside, the rain began again, soft and steady, washing the glass walls clean. Grant turned toward Evelyn. "You know, Rosie's been asking when we'll all go back to the diner. She says cinnamon rolls fix everything." Evelyn's laugh came easily. "Then maybe she's right. Maybe it's time to start again." He took a slow step closer, his voice low and sure. "No more walls, Evelyn. No more walls," she repeated. They stood together as the rain streaked down the windows, the world beyond turning golden with light. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt the weight inside her chest shift, not vanish, but change shape. It wasn't loss anymore. It was hope. And somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled not a warning this time, but applause. Spring brushed Asheville with soft color tulips on every porch, rain-slicked streets smelling of lilac and earth. Evelyn sat by her window, sketching quietly. Her new series, Wings Made of Paper, wasn't about loss anymore. It was about life. Women in wheelchairs, laughing, reading, planting, simply being. Her phone buzzed. "Grant, you free this afternoon?" Big news. "Evelyn, Rosie or trouble?" "Grant, both." She smiled. At Cascade's courtyard, Rosie was crouched among flower beds, pressing folded paper butterflies into the soil. "We're planting hope," she announced. Grant approached with 2 coffees. "She's been doing this all morning." Evelyn accepted a cup, warmth spreading through her hands. "It smells like the diner." "Of course," he said, grinning. Tradition. They sat under the pergola. Sunlight flickered between vines. For a moment, everything felt still. "So," Evelyn asked, "what's the big news?" "You've been chosen for the downtown spring art show," Grant said. "They saw your sketches. You're officially a featured artist." Her heart skipped. "Grant, I don't even know what to say." "Say yes," he replied softly. "You've earned it." Rosie jumped up. "You're famous now." Evelyn laughed through sudden tears. "Not famous, just seen." Grant smiled. "That's all any of us want." The 3 of them stayed there until dusk, Rosie humming, Grant mending a garden post, Evelyn sketching the scene. For the first time, it felt like more than friendship, like healing made real. When Rosie ran ahead toward the car, Grant turned to Evelyn. "You make everything lighter," he said quietly. She looked at him, the fading sunlight catching her eyes. "Maybe we're all learning how to fly again." And for the first time, she believed it. The gallery glowed with soft lights and nervous joy. Evelyn's sketches lined the walls, quiet scenes of strength and everyday beauty. When Grant and Rosie arrived, laughter seemed to follow them. Rosie ran ahead, waving her bunny. "You did it!" Grant pinned a small paper butterfly to Evelyn's sleeve. "From us," he said simply. For a while, everything felt perfect until a reporter stopped by her exhibit. "Wonderful story," the woman said. "So inspiring that your benefactor helped fund your recovery." The words stung. Evelyn froze. Grant started to protest, but she whispered, "It's fine," though it wasn't. The old fear returned that maybe kindness was just another form of pity. She slipped outside into the drizzle, watching the rain blur her reflection on the glass. Inside, Rosie tugged her father's hand, eyes wide with worry. Evelyn looked down. The paper butterfly still clung to her sleeve, trembling but intact. She touched it gently, whispering, "If it's real, it won't fall apart." Then she turned back toward the door, ready to face what waited inside. The next morning, Asheville woke under a pale gold sky. The rain had passed, leaving the streets shining and clean. Evelyn sat by her window, the paper butterfly resting beside her sketchbook, its wings slightly wrinkled, but still whole. She'd barely slept. The reporter's words kept replaying, twisting what had been a perfect night into something fragile and uncertain. But beneath the hurt was another voice, quieter, steadier, reminding her of what Grant had always said: "Bridges are better than walls." By noon, she found herself outside the same cafe where everything had started months ago, the corner table by the window, waiting like an old friend. She ordered a coffee, hands trembling slightly, and waited. She didn't text him. She didn't need to. When the bell over the door finally chimed, she looked up. Grant stood there, rain still on his coat, eyes searching until they found hers. He crossed the room slowly, stopping just beside her table. "I didn't correct her fast enough," he said quietly. "That reporter." I froze. Evelyn nodded, her voice soft. "I know. I never wanted you to think I pitied you." "I don't," she said. "I just," she hesitated, "needed to remember I'm not something to fix." Grant pulled out the chair across from her, the same one that had once been empty. "Then let me sit here, not to fix anything, just to be here." For a moment, neither spoke. The cafe buzzed softly around them, life carrying on. Then Rosie's small voice broke through the door she was running in, bunny in hand. "Miss Evelyn!" she cried. "Daddy said if we're brave, we can start again." Evelyn laughed through tears. "He's right, sweetheart. We can." She looked at Grant, the weight between them finally lifting. "I'm done running from good things." He smiled. "Then let's stop running together." A week later, the town square bloomed with color for Asheville Spring Fair. Music, food stalls, and laughter weaving through the air. The Cascade Center had set up a booth, displaying Evelyn's art alongside therapy programs. Children colored butterflies at a small table, and Rosie ran among them, her curls bouncing like sunlight. Evelyn stood beside Grant, watching. "You did it," she said. "Maggie would have loved this." He shook his head. We did it. You reminded me what her dream really meant. Nearby, Rosie was taping one of Evelyn's drawings to the booth wall, the one of the bridge finally finished. Across it, a man and woman walked side by side, holding hands. She said, "Bridges mean we're never alone," Rosie declared proudly. Evelyn Kelpisilaher. You're right, sweetheart. Bridges mean we keep crossing no matter how hard it rains. Grant reached for Evelyn's hand then, his fingers warm and sure. So what happens now? She smiled. We keep building. They watched Rosie dance through the sunlight, her laughter echoing against the music. Around them, life went on imperfect, beautiful, forgiving. And as the fair bells rang and the breeze lifted the paper butterflies into the air, Evelyn felt something she hadn't in years, not just peace, but belonging. Because some stories don't end with a miracle. They end with people choosing each other again and again. Sometimes life's most powerful stories don't end with grand gestures or fireworks. They end quietly, in a cafe on a rainy morning, or in a garden where laughter grows alongside forgiveness. Evelyn's journey began with heartbreak and silence, yet it found its way toward laughter and light. Grant, too, learned that love isn't about rescuing someone. It's about walking beside them when the road feels uneven. And little Rosie, with her paper butterflies and open heart, reminded them both that hope doesn't need wings to fly. As time passed, the cafe became their place again, not a reminder of pain, but a symbol of healing. The same bell that once rang after someone walked away now chimed when family arrived. And through every shared cup of coffee, every drawing pinned to the refrigerator, they built something real, a home made not of walls, but of trust. Perhaps you've known that kind of quiet redemption yourself, the kind that doesn't announce itself with words, but simply grows in the spaces where you once hurt. Maybe it's in a letter you finally sent, or a Sunday dinner where laughter returned after years of silence. We've all been Evelyn at some point, afraid to believe, afraid to be seen, and maybe, if we're lucky, we've all met someone like Grant or Rosie who helped us believe again. Love and forgiveness can rebuild even the most broken stories. Unconditional kindness can change the direction of a life. Everyone, no matter what they've lost, deserves a family and a chance to be loved again. Happiness doesn't demand perfection. It begins when we choose compassion over pride, presence over distance. Because just like the small porch lights that glow across quiet American neighborhoods at dusk, a single act of kindness can guide someone home through the darkest evening. So tonight, as you listen to this story, maybe think of someone you've drifted away from, a sibling, a friend, a neighbor, and ask yourself if it's time to build that bridge again. Pour a cup of coffee, share a memory, let the silence turn into understanding. And if this story touched something in your heart, press 1" the comments. If you think it could be told better, or if you'd like to share what it meant to you, press 0 and tell us why. Either way, thank you for being here, for keeping your heart open. Because stories like this one don't just belong to Evelyn and Grant, they belong to all of us who are still learning that it's never too late to love, to forgive, and to come home again. From our hearts to yours, may your bridges hold, your porch light stay warm, and your coffee never grow cold.